Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
So hello and welcome to the 39th episode of Soul's 2022 Year of the Ecological Garden webinar series. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. My name is Christine and I am a special lead with Soul. I live in Ottawa, the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. For today's presentation, I'm pleased to introduce Rotinonhsyón from the Kenhte Seed Sanctuary and Learning Center located in Tyendinaga, Mohawk Territory in Southern Ontario. Today's presentation will be approximately 20 minutes and then there will be time for Q&A. As the host of today's session, I will moderate the questions, but if anyone joining us for today's presentation has their own questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or else following the presentation, you can unmute and ask your questions that way. Finally, I'd like to mention that this webinar series and much of Soul's work are made possible by the generous and ongoing support of Gaia College, Canada's leading college for diploma and online courses in organic land care. Over to you.
Segundo juego, what can we do? Deosanic any young cats, dano againato, dano conte get the bogate yaro, dano need a bagano, dano Gandigardi West Jinahe, G Jiwagyotos, G Jagwanahanumha, Ne Gontege. So Segos Evaguego, my name is Dehosanege. I am from Tyendinaga, Gontege, as it's said here. That's our Mohawk word for it. But in English, you can call it Tyendinaga, Mohawk territory. And I'm on the board of the Gontege Seed Sanctuary and Learning Center. And I was an employee up until fairly recently, but I've moved on to some other things. But I remain on the board to help them with some governance stuffs and development and going forward into the future. So we have here my title screen. It says Jijagwanahanumne. It just means we are seed protectors. So we're just going to go over this quickly because I only have 20 minutes. This is a part of a longer presentation, or what could be a longer presentation that introduces you all, because you're likely not familiar with who Rotinonhsyón people are, and Kenhte Rona. So I would have a little bit of a historical overview about who and where we are in the world as Rotinonhsyón people. And then we'll talk a little bit about the cycle of seeds and how that relates to our cycle of ceremony or cosmology. And then I'll get down to the nitty-gritty of the seed sanctuary bit. It all kind of relates together, so you'll see this as we go. So this is where Rotinonhsyón territory is. All the words, all the places where you see on the map that are listed in Mohawk there. Are places where our people have lived, and ranged over throughout history. Some of you may know that our territory was in Upper New York State originally, and that the areas, can you see my mouse here on the screen, guys?
Yep.
Go like that. Okay, so this area is where we are kind of right now, but originally our territory was down here in this region. However, through a whole bunch of history and so on, we've now moved on to where we are today. So you see right in the middle, Tyendinaga Mohawk Nation is right where I'm living right now and speaking to you from. But we have all sorts of our related sister nations all across the Great Lakes region and the St. Lawrence region. Okay, so where did seeds come from? Seeds came from in our cosmology and our mythology from the sky world. So some of you may be kind of familiar. I have some pictures here to show you kind of like the motifs that are present in this part of the story. So in the way back when times, before the world was the world, it was all covered in water and there was the sky world over top of it. And in the sky world, there was a tree, and this tree developed a hole, and for various reasons, this woman fell through the hole. She was pregnant. But while she was falling, she was scraping and grabbing at the tree roots and so on, trying to grab something to hold on to, right? So in the process of that, she grabbed strawberry and tobacco. And that came with her falling down, as you see on the left here, falling down through the sky. And she was caught by some birds and put on a turtle's back like you see there. And then from there, she made the earth with the help of the animals, and she planted strawberry and tobacco at that point. So that's where the original seeds come from. And that's why strawberry and tobacco are so important for my people. And you'll hear that throughout. If you go to events or end up talking to some Rotinonhsyón person, they will probably talk about that at some point if it's like a cultural thing. Anyway, so that being said, where it comes from and how it goes along is the cycle of ceremony, and the cycle matches throughout the cycle of life. So you see this diagram here where it goes right from seed to small plant all the way around to strawberries and back again. That cycle from birth to death and rebirth is present in our ceremonial cycle, in that we're how would I explain this quickly? We acknowledge and give our love and respect and gratitude to the things in creation, so that they continue doing their own life cycle in succession. So we talk to the plants and the winds and the birds, the earth itself, the people even, and then to the various beings, cosmological beings like the thunders and the stars and so on, to do their jobs so that we do our jobs, and it all keeps going around and around and around. So we're thanking them for and asking them to continue to do that while we're going. So now we're going to talk a little bit about like our food system and how it relates to what we're doing at the seed sanctuary. So some of you may have heard of the Three Sisters. Those are the main staple crops. Those are the big crop sort of thing. Like you get lots of yield out of it, particularly with corn and beans. Those two together, if you know how to prepare it properly, is a complete survival meal. You don't need anything else nutritionally. Other things add lots of other variety and tastes and textures and vitamins as well, but you only need those two to survive and get by. So we have the Three Sisters, but if you look into the research and consider the way indigenous people, not just Rotinonhsyón, relate to and use their land, you'll have other things like amaranth, ground cherry, potatoes, sunchokes, and so on, and sunflowers. They also fit into this how do you call it, complex, an agricultural complex. And then beyond that, you would have orchards and nut trees. And in this one book I read, it claimed that 1 in 4 trees at the time of European arrival was a nut tree, and that could be a chestnut, a hickory nut, black walnut, whatever, what have you, that were native and indigenous to North America, would have been used at some point, and tended and promoted in the forests by natural means, as well as encouragement by human actors. And it's not like we'd cut down a forest and plant whole new trees. No, we just encourage the ones that are existing there normally, or using them in certain ways. Coppicing is another thing you might want to think about in terms of like wood use. Anyway, so all of this landscape maintenance is done in a holistic way. As I said, it ties into the way the ceremonies are put through year by year in succession, going from when the things start to bud out and to bloom in the early spring, and it follows the natural progression of the plants as they come out throughout spring, summer, and then follows their death cycle as well into fall and the harvest cycle. So in that also, because of the way we approach things, it's a reciprocal relationship, because we always offer tobacco and words and our love, essentially, to ensure that it keeps going. And I say it's generational here and relational in that we're by generation. So like my grandparents and then my parents and me and then my children and grandchildren and so on will continue doing those same things to make sure that the cycle continues to go. But it's also, we're related to each other in that, direct way, but we're related to the things in creation because we tend them in this generational pattern. We get attached to it in a way, and they become attached to us also. So that's also part of it. And then just like a little tidbit note on how much food we were to actually produce. If you're aware, the Sullivan Campaign was one of the last acts of the American War of Independence, and it was designed to crush us. George Washington at the time ordered General Sullivan, who's named here, to go through the territories and to burn us out, essentially. So we became refugees after that. But what they did destroy was about 7 years worth of food storage, and that amounted to some million odd bushels of corn or something that were just stored. That wasn't what was in the field at the time, but that was what was stored in the various longhouses around or in the ground or something like that. So it was a lot. And what that really sort of like points out is how successful this farming and agricultural system and this food system that Rotinonhsyón people operated. Now, if you're to extrapolate that in a certain way to other nations across North America, we have this giant, all-encompassing food system that pretty much every aspect of land is used in some way and encouraged in some way to produce food for not only ourselves, but for the birds and the animals, and then ultimately for the earth. So onto the seed sanctuary. So because of colonization and so on, and the genocide and loss of culture through that, we as Rotinonhsyón people have become colonized, obviously, but we've also lost a lot of the knowledge having to do with the land. Now, we're like Dundegi by itself, Tyonega is a agricultural community, historically even. Like in the recent history, we're an agricultural community. So the memory of those types of things still kind of lie here and remain. So because of that, there's a group of people, seed keepers and farmers that came together to take on the seed collection. And we've been doing that for a few years now. I guess since 2018 officially is when we put the first things in the ground to start. So this is our land. This is our land base here. This is what you see is mostly Tyonega, what it looks like from the air in the middle. So in the middle picture, we have that's our field, and you see the beginnings of our beds there. This picture is from 2018, when we were just establishing, and it's a little bit different now. We have some buildings up, some sheds, and different garden plots here and there. But it's still in this half moon cycle, this half circle cycle around this little copse of trees. And the reason we do that, have that there, is so that we can have one, a block for cross-pollination. Like if you have just a group of trees in the middle, you can plant one crop on one side and one of the same crop on the other side, and it'll cut down on the rate of cross-pollination possibility, I guess. So you can grow multiple things at a time. And this setup allows it to grow about 50 different varieties of vegetables at once per year, out of the 300 or so varieties that we tend in this collection that we have. I'll get to here. So we see these like the various work bees. We got some volunteers coming together. There's one of our buildings that was put up last year, at the end of last year. And yeah, so that's that. That's what we would look like. Now you're not going to be able to see this very well because it wasn't formatted nicely. It was formatted for a legal size piece of paper, so it doesn't fit here. Okay, but you see here, starting at the top, we have midwinter right here, and that's when our new year begins, and it goes onward to spring. So we fall here: maple, thunders, seeds, strawberries, the green bean, the green corn, harvest, and the end of season. So that's the cycle of ceremonies as it follows. These, like midwinter, Wata, ready wear, seeds, and so on, those are the names of the major ceremonies. So our agricultural year follows, and food gathering year follows each thing as it comes out, and it moves with the seasons and with the land that we live on, right? So we follow this same pattern of the seed sanctuary because we're ultimately an agricultural group, so we have to follow the pattern of the year, and this nicely encapsulates our ideology and our actual physical practices. So a bit of history then on the seed sanctuary itself. the seed collection was tended by this old couple. They're called the Mokes. I don't know their first names. They were just the Mokes, to me anyway. And they had it for about 40 years. They lived, I think, north of Napanee. And then the Sisters of Providence, they're a group of nuns, convent in Kingston, took it on when the Mokes were a little bit too old and elderly to carry on. So they took the collection from there. And then once they have, like, they're basically in their 90s now, all the sisters, and they don't seem to be bringing in new people or too much more money, and they don't really have much of a land base either to actually grow out all of these things that they have. Because when the Mokes had it, there was upwards of 400 varieties, and many have, they scaled back, or some were lost because there was too many. So when the Sisters of Providence approached us, Rotinonhsyón, to take over the sanctuary, the collection rather, it was in a state of, I don't want to say shambles, but it was a disrepair kind of way, right? Because of those reasons. So we took it over and split the collection with the Kingston Area Seed System Initiative, which is our partner organization to this day, who has had the other half of the collection. In terms of seed amounts, not actual, like we have 150, they have 150. No, we both have a set of 300 each, and that'll just double the chances of keeping these heirloom seeds together. So that whole process from the Sisters of Providence was put through in what you call a rematriation, or what we're calling a rematriation. So they there was a formal ceremony in handing it over. We made a wampum, which was seen at the beginning. I took that picture. Actually, I should have kept it in. To signify the passing of the seeds, because a lot of the seeds in the collection would have been indigenous to North America before. And when the seeds, what you call the Columbian exchange, where things from the old world and the new world were transferred to each other via colonization, the seeds that we had went over to Europe, changed a whole bunch of things about cuisine and food and agriculture. And when that happened, because there was already established agriculturalists in the old world, or Eurasia, if you will, they changed them, bred them back to each other, created all new different varieties of things, and then the seeds come back to us. And that's where we are with this collection that we have. There's something like 60 different tomatoes, probably like 30 different types of beans, and so on. Like, all those beans would have been from North America originally. The Phaseolus vulgaris variety is indigenous to here. However, they went out and were changed, and they came back, but it's still the same thing almost, in my mind. Anyway, so let's get on. So in 2018, as I said, we got established here, and we got access to land from Mohawks of Bay of Quinte, the band council here. They were generous enough to allow us to use a plot of land for this experiment to try and build community seed sovereignty. And that's what we're about, is building community seed sovereignty. So, Yogunohanumstats, what does that mean? Seed saving. That means to save some seed and put it aside. That's what we're doing. The collection, as I said, is indigenous and heirloom collection of seed. And to us, that is very critical to the actual food security writ large. We've been hearing here and there, because of the pandemic and because of this rampant inflation now, that prices for food are out of control and becoming close to being unaffordable for most people. And this is where we kind of are stepping in to address that issue, to at once conserve heirloom varieties of seed, but also to ensure that there's a source of seed that's free of GMOs, kind of thing, I guess you don't even want to call it, and the seeds themselves that we tend are locally, regionally adapted and are grown out on a cycle so that they become climate adapted as well. So it moves with the changes that we see on the land. Great. So food sovereignty, what does it mean to be sovereign? in Indigenous communities, this is a big question for, like, particularly with how land works and our own self-determination. And to me, being food sovereign means that we can feed all of ourselves without being dependent upon outside economics. And seeds are the foundation of that. Without a source of seed that we control ourselves, then we cannot get to that food sovereignty. Because as some of you may know, the food system right now is controlled by corporations by and large, and they control almost every aspect, right from the seed all the way to the table. So there is no real independence in that. There's no real choice either, or freedom in a certain way, other than what you can buy with money. And that is, to me, becoming in a certain way less valuable, only because the prices of things seem to be not tied to the actual labor involved. Anyway, so that being said, this project is feeding into the food sovereignty for Rotinonhsyón territory, because for its generally seek to self-determine and to be sovereign by ourselves. And that means that we need certain things in line, not only economics and jobs and all these things, education, but also a food source. And that's critical to access going forward. Okay, that's it. I have some resources here that you can look at.
Well, and you also, you have a website, you have Facebook, you have.
Oh, yes, those things, right? Yes.
What those are, just because there's just a lot of information to share. And if you want to just mention what those are, they might be taken up by people.
Yes, we have a website. It's called Gandege Seeds, or Gandege Seed Sanctuary. I'd have to look that up again. Hold on. So it's Gandege Seed Sanctuary. There's our website. You can find us on social media at Gandege Seeds. That's our handle. I'll put it here in the chat.
Great. Okay.
Seeds. At Gandege Seeds. So that's our socials. And
yeah, and if anybody's interested, there's also a long profile, a profile on Soul's website, because this site has was one of the original 2021 Greener Green Spaces. So it's presented on Soul's website as part of that collection of sites across the country that are fostering the sense of stewardship and land care, and with that sense of, well, and they're slightly different, all of them, but really they are about connecting to the land, connecting to the other species and these plants and food systems and all of that. So please check that out and connect on social media perhaps, and look at the website. But I must say that was such an interesting presentation. You can tell you've done this before. There's so much content in terms of giving some perspective, and also just this overview. And I guess I just want to start by saying, if anybody has a question, they can put it in the chat, but we can also unmute. But I would like to start with a question, and I hope you don't mind if it's a bit personal, because right off the bat, you said you used to work there, but now you're doing something else, but you're on the board. So I just wanted to ask you whether, or what is your, what is this place? What does this Learning Center Seed Sanctuary mean to you? Why are you connected to this? What brings you to this? And why are you pursuing this ongoing connection?
well, I've been involved in a lot of community development and cultural revitalization projects since I was a kid, basically. Been learning language for a long time, and that was my original shtick, was language revitalization and pushing that and so on. I circled back around to that now with this new job I'm in, but language revitalization is very, very difficult. And just to consider, I'll give you some context for that. There are very few speakers And if you're to learn a language in isolation, it doesn't work. You need to have a group of people around you to surround you with that language and to interact in that language. So you need like wraparound media, a speech community, education to go along with that. So there's a whole bunch of little things, I say little, but a whole bunch of large things, pieces that need to be in place to be successful. And for a lot of people, that's beyond reach. And in particular, like to actually learn language successfully, you need to banish English completely, so that it doesn't invade your brain, basically. So it's hard, is what all that means, and is not very accessible to everybody. However, food is accessible to everybody, and like in general, I'd like to move our communities, and my community in particular, toward a decolonizing process, decolonizing practice. And as I said, language is one of those things, but it's, as I said, difficult. But instead, food, which we interact with every day and have to cook and prepare every day, we can have that relationship a little more easily, and to change our ideas and habits regarding food in certain ways that can move us in that direction. And this is one of those things. Like I'm kind of a half-assed farmer myself. I only do a couple things well, but it started for me there is with food and the relationship to having good food, not eating craft dinner when I was at school or away from home, that kind of thing. So I learned to cook, and that's where I come into this situation, is having good, clean food sort of thing. Nothing tastes better than a field tomato.
Yeah.
Like if you're in the whole scale of tomatoes, right? Like grocery tomatoes suck. So that's where I come into it, is through relationship to cuisine, and not necessarily seeds themselves. I grew for food, and I didn't grow for seed until I actually started like working around with these guys. But yeah, that's where I come into it.
Well, maybe you could speak to a little bit of the sense that this is not only the seed sanctuary, there are seed gardens, but people from the wider community are involved. They come and you showed a photo of when there's community gatherings around this space, and how that does offer the opportunity to learn language associated. It's, again, you say food is so important, but food and this cultural tradition and language are all part and parcel, like they all connect to each other. So how does the community get involved in this site, and what are they, as a learning center, what is sort of learnt in the process?
Well, in terms of like public access or community things, we have events. The majority of our events are like work bees. Because our group is so small, we like it's all basically off the side of our desks how we organize these things. So not everything comes to fruition that we hoped for all the time, year by year kind of thing. Like we always say, like we want to think, oh, we're going to have like 10 or so different guest speakers or like different events, but then, life takes over. So we don't get that many, right? But what we do have is we typically have talks in the springtime, and because of the plague, it's been over Zoom. But we normally have those in a face-to-face setting where we talk about planting by the moon. Was one of the things that we did this year, where we got someone from Ganawage to come and explain how we would traditionally plant by the moon cycle, and to know which moons do you do it under, like is it half moon, full moon, new moon, and all the rules pertaining to that. And I did a little bit of that planting in the past 2 years, and I can say that planting on the moon is successful in a certain way, just like the Earth just knows. Is the right time, even though my calendar and the temperature gauges I'm looking at and everything, it's kind of wishy-washy sometimes, but it's just a matter of experience that way. So beyond that, and also we host workshops in the gardens themselves, and kind of like just like enjoyable, relaxing day sort of thing. One of the big events that we do is called Seed to Salsa, in which we invite people to come and just kind of hang out with us, ask questions. We give tours of the gardens. And then after this is done, we gather up the tomatoes that are ready and the peppers that are ready, onions and so on, that we can sacrifice for this event. But also we do a seed saving demonstration with the tomatoes that we've picked to make into salsa right in that moment. So once we've done the seed demonstration, we make the salsa and then we eat. So it's kind of like social stuff wrapped up together with education. Is how we do it.
All right. Well, a question that's coming from Nate is: are there plants that have been historically tied to your culture that have gone extinct that you know of?
Plants. I don't know about plants, like a whole species. No, I don't have that much knowledge regarding every plant in existence that we would have used, but things have fallen out of use is more what happened, or certain varieties of planted vegetables or that kind of thing fell out of use or had been lost, that kind of thing. Trying to think of a situation. Okay, well, a couple of years ago in Six Nations, that's down near Brantford, for those of you that don't know, some of the traditional seakeepers down there had a whole bunch of corn, white corn, I think, was it? Some sort of corn, I forget what kind of variety it was now, but they planted it all out. It didn't work or take, like it was too cold or wet or something that year. So they lost their seed, replanted again, and it didn't really come through and they weren't really able to harvest it. So that's one instance where things could go very badly, that you're just trying to like get through a normal year of planting. And I know of another family down there that had a particular cornbread bean, and due to a late frost, they lost their whole crop. So things can happen like that. So yes, it's possible that we have lost certain varieties, because I've been told that at one point each family would have had their own particular variety of thing they did. So one family may have had like their own special bean. This other family had another kind of corn, or this other one had whatever, right? So diversity is encouraged in a certain way. But then also, like, because of that diversity, it increases your chances of success, because like if one type of variety of vegetable is hit by a disease or frost or something, you have other stuff to back it up. Different varieties that may be frost tolerant or disease tolerant, that kind of thing. And then on the other side, for gathering things, yeah, that would follow like out of use in terms of the grocery store, basically, like post-World War II, availability of commodity goods like canned foods, frozen foods, that kind of thing, really kind of replaced a lot of stuff that was used before, like things like home canning, kitchen gardens, and even foraging out in the bush, nut gathering, and so on, has negatively affected our food system. And through colonialism and residential school, knowledge is lost. Because you got to think about the entire knowledge base of a people that is not literate in the way that they can record information in separate bodies to themselves. All of our knowledge is contained within us. So each person would have a different skill. And that each of those people would make up the whole community, and they'd be a giant body of knowledge. So with genocide, you cut that down very significantly. And if it's a very compressed genocide, then knowledge is lost very quickly and is not passed on. So that's where things would be lost, so to speak, if not actually being wiped off the earth in terms of the plant is gone itself. Does that help? Does that make sense?
No, it definitely makes sense. And that loss is enormous. But there's there's interest from a participant to hear a little bit more about the framework of the concepts of when you speak about holistic thinking and reciprocal, relational, and generational. Right now, you've mentioned it in your presentation and just in this last response, but those are really strong concepts. That the reciprocal one in relations to other beings is and the idea of the generational. You spoke about that earlier, and how you are constantly thinking about past generations for future generations. So do you mind just speaking about that again, or talking about those concepts?
Well, as to the generational thing, like you hear people talk about the 7 generations or whatever. Well, we don't have that concept. Ours, it's a similar thing, what we say, but it's the Hadikon, and that just means the faces yet to come. And that refers to all the people who will come eventually, who aren't here yet. So we're doing all of this work for them, basically, is what that boils down to in terms of generational ways of looking at it. Like you can say 7 generations, but who are those people? You don't know them. There's some mythology in the future, some mythology in the past, even if you wanted to go that way. And it's really for your grandchildren that you personally, as a person, can really think about. So that's where we get this idea comes. It's the faces yet to come, the babies that come out of the earth. Sort of. As to the whole reciprocal thing, that's just integral to like the cycle. If you think about gardening, and the way industrial agriculture works now is that you have all these additives in it, but you're not really adding anything of substance to the soil. And they're just taking and taking and taking. And without reciprocation, then the soil will die. It will turn to desert. That's what will happen. So that's like the physical consequences of not being reciprocal to the earth. So in terms of being that, like you can physically put it back, but to do it in a real good way, you have to be in the mental headspace to do that also. And you have to live your life like that to actually enact that thing. To me, anyway, that's what you have to do if you're going to live in a reciprocal relationship.
Well, one thing that you were saying earlier too about reciprocity is also in ceremony, and like there's the practice, but also so related to ceremony, and that gives you that opportunity for the gratitude, but also for the, I guess, having a tradition that comes with different seasons or different moments in time, and so that struck with me. And what would you say is just sort of the importance of ceremony? Is that on the increase, do you think, that the community is more in tune with some of the traditional ceremony related to agricultural practices?
Well, ceremony to me is a reminder.
Hmm.
It reminds us humans who tend to forget things, what our responsibilities are. That's what it is. The actual spiritual relationship of reciprocation isn't done in that moment. That relationship is carried with you every day through praxis. So to me, like the ceremonies aren't necessarily the real important thing. And the important thing is the praxis of it. And the ceremonies, we all come together to celebrate that, and to remind ourselves that that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Something you just said is the responsibility. That's an important word, I guess, or concept as well. Well, someone is asking a pretty specific question, and that is if you can say a little bit more about the requickening, dreaming, storytelling time at midwinter on the cosmology.
Have you ever heard that word before, requickening?
Well,
No, I only ask because I've never seen it outside of anything relating to like Rotinonhsyón people. Like I've tried looking for that word and I have not found what it means.
So
I know what it kind of means in my mind after quickening. Huh?
Okay.
What?
Well, so it's a Haudenosaunee concept then.
Well, not really, but I mean just that word, requicken. To quicken something means to give it life, I believe. But to re-quicken, that's not English per se, but it really kind of just filters into like you're just making the life go around like that. So you're renewing is what it means. And that's referring to midwinter. So that's the beginning of our year. But if you look at and consider how the seasons work and so on, like we come out of winter and it's spring, everything is being born and it's all full of life, and everything go through summer, that's midlife, go through the autumn, that's the end of life, and then the earth rests at that point. We all rest at that point, or should be, due to modern capitalism and so on. We don't get that opportunity, but we should all be. And like in all traditional economies, like before industrialized economies came to be, everybody was on this schedule, or on their climactic schedule, I guess, depending on where they're, like, everybody has a winter time kind of thing where there's downtime or nothing going down, in terms of food getting, or whatnot. So ours is midwinter, where that's the time of storytelling, because there's no time otherwise in the spring, summer, and fall, because we're always out getting food or trading, whatever, building stuff. So that's the time to recharge. That's turning over the ashes. That's all that's about. So dreaming, just imagining, I would call that also, not just necessarily dreaming, but dreaming and imagining together. Storytelling, that's when we tell our stories to each other, and to remind ourselves of of our role and our place in the universe. That's mostly what those stories filter down to.
And who would be telling the stories?
People, storytellers, people who can spin a good yarn, will be telling these stories. I don't, like, I'm not really sure if there was such a thing as like a storyteller, but they could have been old people, they could be young people in my mind. It would probably be a lot of old people, because they would have the language to describe the nuances and to explain about certain aspects and concepts, as they relate to real life and as they relate to the story.
Okay, another question coming is, did you use the word reincarnating in the cycle of life of plants? Is that a way of thinking about plants reincarnating?
No, what do you mean by reincarnation first? Let's get that out of the way.
Yeah, it's someone sending a direct message, and I'm moderating and asking the question, so I don't quite know what you mean, what they mean by it.
I will invite this person to unmute themselves.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Thanks for sharing your experience and knowledge. It was a response to the re-quickening. When in your talk, you used a word in going through the cycle. I think with the strawberry, or with the strawberry cycle, it was the idea that they would die and then they would come back to life. And I thought you'd use the word reincarnating, but I wasn't quite sure. And I was relating that to the idea of re-quickening. And just, yeah, so that's what I wasn't going Buddhist or anything. Yeah.
I figured that's what you were referring to, but I just thought, rather than make you type out the whole thing, probably be easier to say it. As to reincarnation, I don't think so. In particular, with the baggage of that word and its ties to other religions, I couldn't say with confidence that that's what that means, or whether or not there's a spirit of the strawberry per se, that does die and get reborn. I don't really know. I can't really answer that. My gut feeling says no, that's not how that goes, and that things just die and are born again as we are as humans. I'm not really sure how to answer that one exactly.
And I think that's fine. I was just checking out what my catch of the word was, and you've said reborn, and maybe I translated that into reincarnate in some way. It's where my old brain is working at the moment.
I think you're on the right path in the sense that, in terms of your thinking, that that there is a life cycle, and as necessary part of that life cycle is death. But it just keeps going around, right?
Yeah.
There's no end point per se. The only end point is what our hubristic minds will tell us that there is an end point.
Mhm. Gotcha. While I'm here, do you mind if I just ask a question about storytelling? Okay. A story that I've come across is where the grandfather rock gives stories to the people, and it's always intrigued me why grandfather rock, and I wondered if it was to do. I've often wondered if it's to do with people digging in the earth, looking at their environment, finding things like fossils and other things that they had to make sense of.
I don't know what story you're talking about. I don't think that is one of ours. That sounds to me like it's an Anishinaabe story. But as to where our stories come from, yes, they do come from our experience in the earth. I have heard references to fossils and things like that you're talking about, and that goes down a fairly deep rabbit hole that I don't exactly want to get into, but it does get referenced. And there are these monsters per se that we talk about that is the responsibility of the thunder beings to keep in the earth. I don't really know too much more about that actually.
Okay. That's okay. As you mentioned storytelling, and I've had that question for a long time. I thought I'd ask it and see what happened. I don't need to hold anything else up with it. Thanks.
Well, in terms of storytelling in total, like these myths and legends are not really, you shouldn't take them as like history per se. Perhaps they are events that cross over lots of time, that are different events that are just kind of neatly put together into a narrative. It's more important that you see them as a way of instructing our viewpoint on the world and our experience within it. And this goes for all mythology. All mythology is like this. In that you can kind of tease out where people are thinking based upon how and when they're telling the story and what the characters and metaphors are in it. Yeah.
All right. Well, I have one more question, and then we are a little bit over time anyway. So, and that is, you mentioned sister nations, and I was just wondering, has there been any transfer of seeds to other sister nations, or just sharing the knowledge or the approach that you've taken for the seed rematuration and seed saving the gardens? Do you share that information and document it in any way to be
No.
available for others? No.
We don't document it per se. That is a relatively recent thing that we've been trying to do in the terms of like research on our site. But no, our way of going about seed saving and an approach to seed sovereignty and food sovereignty ultimately is taken directly from our communities and the people in the communities. We have traditional agriculturalists still. We still have traditional seed keepers, and they exist in all of our communities. So some things have been lost, but we do hold on to a whole bunch of stuff still. So we are in contact with a lot of these people all the time, and like we share information with each other, not necessarily seeds all the time, but we share information in terms of practices and whatever. So it exists still, like, and it's, our model is based upon that. Now, what's new is this research part. What's new also is the burgeoning food movement and growers movement in our community. So as I said, because of colonization, a lot of that tradition was lost. This is because of forced dependency. That's what the colonization created, was a situation of forced dependency, and that we were dependent upon the government or whoever. So it was taken away in a certain way. But now with this food movement and with the extenuating circumstances in our world around us, a lot of people are getting back into growing, and food preparation and preservation and cuisine is now becoming a thing. Like, I don't know if you guys have heard of this guy, Sean Sherman, or Tanya Brandt. They're two chefs. Like, Tanya Brandt's from Six Nations. She's actually on is it Top Chef Canada or something right now? Like, check out that at some Food Network, I've been told. I haven't seen it myself, but I know this woman. She has a restaurant in Six Nations, and she's trying to revitalize our traditional cuisine, which I think is something like Mexican food, beans and tortillas and all that. But that's just my own opinion. But has a fusion restaurant in Six Nations, and same thing with Sean Sherman. His cuisine is a kind of a fusion, in that because of the colonial dependency, like dependency on commodity goods like flour, sugar, and lard. That was the things that were given to us on reserves, and in the United States on the reservations. That became our cuisine. So you hear things like fry bread and bannock and all these things, whatever, right? But that's refined carbs, not good for you. What we would have had was a lot of greens and berries and some meats and fish. And depending on whether or not your nation was agricultural, you'd have the fruits of your labor that way. So it's a process of rebuilding that and changing perspectives on what our relationship to food is within our communities. I don't know where we started with all that, but that's where we ended up in terms of food knowledge and like seed saving knowledge. That's what you're talking about. Okay.
And sharing practices. First of all, sharing seed, but sharing practices. That's where you said is more of what you're doing. Sharing practices.
Yeah, I'll say that a lot of the seed keepers. Huh?
Well, you're also inspired by raising the consciousness about food sovereignty, all of that. That cuisine it's really quite important, and those are movements that are happening, and that's revising some of the food traditions and exposing them to other the colonial mainstream really.
I would say this about the sharing of seed. We're a little bit stingy, and the only reason for that is because we don't know how skilled you are as a grower if we were to give you seed. And like in the way that if we were to preserve a particular variety, then you have to know what you're looking for. You have to know what you're doing first to be able to get an expected result. So there has to be an amount of education and practice that goes into something before we personally, as a group at Kenhte Seed Sanctuary, would hand out seed for the purpose of it coming back to us eventually, and to increase the amount of seed there is. So yeah, otherwise people just keep taking, and
it's just careful. It's just the stewardship of those seeds and the importance of doing it in a certain way. Stingy is.
yes.
Yeah. Anyway, this was really interesting, informative. I want to thank you very, very much for doing this today. And as I said, we will be posting this on Soul's website, and we know that it will go farther. Since we are national, we know that people will be looking at this from different places. And just, I think you provided such a interesting and thoughtful presentation. So thank you very much. And for everybody who came to, there's been a glitch in just a little bit of the timing, someone's internet connection, maybe mine. But just want to thank everybody for coming today. And we are continuing this series. So every Tuesday at this time until the end of the year. And most of them, or almost all of them, are posted on Soul's website. So again, thanks for time today, everybody. And let's all sort of consider and process what we've heard today. It's very important, I think, for all of us to hear. So on that, I will end the Zoom, but have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Ja.